Hello everyone, with the new release of 1.0 for Necesse, I decided to play it and give it a try. Here are my first impressions of playing Necesse. So once starting your journey on Necesse, you have to pick a type of world. So I picked survival, and it's basically more or less similar to the concept of Terraria, where you can make and craft whatever you want. Survival is the basic, how you're supposed to play it kind of at the start kind of mode. And there was a bunch of difficulties. I just picked the classic one. I didn't want to go hard I didn't want to do like brutal or difficult modes until I kind of understood the game better. I did look at some world settings to see like if I wanted to change a couple things. I did basically just left them the same just to kind of see how the experience is at the start of the game and not play with any settings. A lot of them just did seem to be sliders of like frequency or health bars or other things related to like that kind of scaling where I didn't really want to touch that. There was a thing where whenever you host the game, you had to select sort of like the rules of the network. Honestly, for this, you can change it anytime you want, so don't worry about having to only have 10 slots available, but you can just always change that later at a later point. So don't worry about whenever you host it, just make sure you can play and kind of jump in. I did end up playing with my friend for this, and for clarification, I have never played this game before. I think I made a character just to see if it worked or whatever when I bought it before 1.0 because I was excited to play it for when 1.0 released. When it comes to the character creation though, it was very similar to Terraria where you had a bunch of hairstyles. I feels like it was a little bit less than Terraria, but it made you could make a character pretty well. It wasn't anything too crazy, but you know, some basic eye shapes and hairstyles and skin color and stuff like that. When it came to your clothing is a cosmetic that isn't attached to you. So technically you can like take off your clothing, it's a cosmetic item, and just be naked. So don't worry about the color of your clothing too much, as when you find any cosmetic item or any piece of armor that you can equip, you can just put it on your cosmetic equipable slot, and then your clothing aren't ever going to be a permanent thing that you have on you unless you want to look like that forever. But I ended up replacing my cosmetic stuff very quickly, so I never end up having my shirt and pants as I colored them. And as you can see, I'm Rick from Rick and Morty, of course. But anyway, this seems to be the easiest character to make. As soon as I saw that cyan hair color, I'm like, I know what I'm making. So with that, I made my character and I loaded into the game. I was waiting for my friend to make his character so we could time it correctly and be in the game at the same time. So at the start of the game, you pop into this big world. Now, obviously, it's very similar looking to games like Terraria or Starbound or whatever. Obviously, it's a different plane of playing. It's kind of like Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past type kind of perspective. Now, if you've played Terraria, this should be a very similar experience, quite frankly. In terms of like the similarities between Terraria and Necesse, they are very similar. Necesse is probably inspired from Terraria in some sense because it has a lot of its systems. So something as simple as the crafting guide, where you would have to go to him to give him an item to see what you could craft with that item. You just have that as a book, as an item in your inventory at the start. So if you're like, ooh, I got some logs, what can I craft with logs? And it gives you every item you can craft with logs. Now, the difference here is that in this game, there is hunger. So hunger wasn't too big of a deal. At the start of the game, you have blueberry bushes, and I do end up mining those bushes to put closer to my base. You really don't have to worry about food in essence. You just do have to keep track of it. My friend, for some reason, would always just forget to eat and always forget to bring food, so I just had to give him some of mine. When it came to the settings, a lot of the settings I used were just the baseline. I think the only thing I really changed was there was like an FPS counter. Make sure you sync up your FPS cap and turn off reduced UI frame rate. It's kind of annoying and janky. So whenever you look at something hovering over like a squirrel, the squirrel's name isn't low frame rate. I wanted it smoother. Obviously, this would help for if you have like a lower grade PC or whatever, and you can't run games very well, you can obviously lower that frame rate. But for me, it was super annoying. I wanted to be able to see that smoothly walk across the screen, of course. But as I said, it's very similar to Terraria. There's like the food system, and you know, the first thing you should be doing is chopping down trees, mining some stone, making a furnace, making an anvil once you get iron. It's very similar to that kind of development process where you mine and do various tasks and go on adventures to try to get more stuff, go build some stuff to go do some more adventures that are more difficult, all that stuff. Now, when talking to what this game calls the Elder, which is essentially just the guide, I did try to figure out all this stuff by myself without any help, without any looking up or searching on Google or looking at various videos or anything. So I did try to figure this all out by myself. I could figure out the majority of what to do or where to go and what things were. There were some things that were a little bit more complicated. I did talk to the Elder, and he kind of gives you those tips kind of whenever you talk to the guide in Terraria. It's kind of like, oh, like, you know, when you can summon a demon with the mysterious portal, which is basically the first boss. And a lot of the tips were kind of helpful. A little bit just kind of give you the idea of what was going on. Like ladders let you go underground, and there's basically, imagine a world, your base world of where you are right now. Then you would put a ladder down, and then you could go a layer below you. So essentially there's two maps stacked on top of each other, and each one has their own biomes depending on how far you go out into the like further out from wherever you spawned, essentially. So after you did all, I did all that and kind of got a little bit of grounding of where I was and what things were. First thing you do is going to make a crafting station and get some stone as well. You can do that through there are little rock nodes, I guess if you want to call them that, where you just mine them and break the stone, make furnaces and or whatever kind of related crafting station that you would want to create more things. There is a day and night cycle very similar to how Terraria does it. So that threat that occurs in Terraria at night is very similar to how it works like this. You are going to be having zombies spawn in your vicinity. They're going to try to attack you. The house seems pretty safe. I don't think they can enter the houses through the doors. Also, the guide is very competent in terms of his combat ability. You can hit him, so just be careful. I don't think I've ever like did enough damage for them to attack me back. I did try to test it a little bit, but they didn't seem to be able to. They didn't seem to want to attack me if I hit them by accident. But they are very durable. They are very tanky. In the later stages, it becomes something else. But like Terraria, in each location, there were places like little kind of event areas or whatever you want to call them. It's like, oh, there's a little abandoned shack or something, or like some ruins, and there's how do they have a chest. So it's very similar in that aspect to Terraria as well, where you can find various items and cool resources in chests. And this is for both the underground and the, I'll just call it the first floor world or whatever you want to call it, the first layer of the map you spawn on. There was also something where you have teams much similar to Terraria as well. I'm probably going to be saying that quite a bit. I played Terraria for like 600 hours or something, or 700 hours. So it is a very referenceable thing for me, since the games are very similar. But you can make teams and you can have people join them so you can see where they are. Pretty simple. Nothing more benefit than that. There are teleport scrolls, so you can like teleport to your teammate if he's far away, which is very much a thing that we had an issue with. My friend would run off and I would have to go run after him and, you know, try to get to him. If he took a different route or something, it would kind of be annoying to try to get to him. It was pretty simple, but it was just a thing that you had to like, oh, you know, teleport scrolls are pretty awesome. Now, when it came to the underground, it is just essentially a map when you spawn in, and then the underground is a map underneath that map. So essentially it's double the size of the actual base world. So much like the top of the world, I'll just call it, the underground is very similar to where it has its own biomes. So the further you go out from your spawn area, your initial starting area, there were biomes in the underground and there were biomes above the ground on the top of the world. This is where you are going to get a lot of stuff. A lot of the time, whenever I was up on the top of the world, so far at least, I've only played 13 hours in so far. A lot of the time, whenever I wanted to go on an adventure, it was in the underground. Now, there were some events that happened as well, but I'll be talking about that later. But a lot of the items and progression seem to happen a lot underground. A lot of being on the top layer of the world, it was commonly just a lot of minor things like trees or animals or whatever, and there's some enemies, but it wasn't like anything too crazy. It was kind of like Terraria in that sense, where when you're running across the world in Terraria, usually whatever you were doing something, it was in the caves. That's where a lot of the content happens, right? Now, there are places where in the world that we discovered where there was like a dungeon, much like Terraria, and you would go into a specific layered zone isolated away from everything else. But as I said, the majority of all the progression was happening underground. There was points of interest on the top world. We haven't really done too many of them. We did do a dungeon. It's a puzzle essentially that you have to do and you get rewards for it. And then there's some other stuff where it's like a progression area, much similar to Terraria, where it's like you fight that old man or whatever, right? And you fight Skeletron to get into that, forget what it's called, but the dungeon area. As you can see here, there is some variety of weapons. So there is like the great sword, which I loved because it was a sword that you had to charge up, and there was 3 stages of damage. You do have to charge it up in the first stage to even swing it. So it's not like it's a quick item. You do have to like charge up until that first tier noise, and then any noise past that, any tier past that, charge up would be greater damage essentially. So it was pretty cool. And there was some standard melee weapons, very similar. And there's also little loot goblins like this, like they run around and they kind of have, they primarily didn't have any like items per se, but they did have a very valuable resource, whatever area you were in. So if you were in this starting area of the underground, they would have gold, and gold was kind of hard to find. So you would kill those guys and they kind of run off. They're very easily killable. You just gotta chase them. They can lead you down very heavily defended paths, but they don't disappear. You can always just go and find them again. It's not a big deal. So don't feel like you need to like chase after them and put yourself in a dangerous position. There are kind of biomes. If you've played Terraria, there are biomes like the winter biome, and generally speaking, the differences weren't too big. It wasn't like the going into the corruption versus going into the forest, right? Forest starting area is very simple. It's like, oh, like some slimes or whatever, and maybe a couple zombies or whatever. Very simple. That's the starting area. Frost area is kind of similar in that way, where it's not necessarily like a second tier of the zone. It's kind of like just a continuation of the starter area, if that makes sense. There were areas where it's like, oh, hey, this is definitely a higher tier area. Like this is tier 2 instead of just tier 1.5 or something, right? Much like Terraria, as I said, like the sand biome, it's like, it's harder, but it's not like it's like a big deal per se. It's like, there's not a lot of like content there. It's just a little bit of an extension of that base starting area versus when we got into a little bit of this kind of deserty kind of area where it's kind of like fall leaves and stuff like that. That's when I was like, okay, yeah, like these enemies are significantly stronger. They have different resources that you collect, right? So it's very different from the experiences of each location. And then whenever you do die in this game, depending on their difficulty, obviously, we are playing classic difficulty. Whenever you do die, you spawn basically at your bed. I think you spawn, if you don't have your bed spawn set, you will essentially probably just spawn at that area, I assume, much like Terraria. You don't lose anything. You drop all your stuff on the ground. The only issue that I had was my friend occasionally picking up my stuff whenever I died. Or, you know, when he died, I had to pick up his stuff and you have to walk back, and it's quite a ways away, and you kind of have to take the right path and try to get back to him. So it's a little annoying. That's where those teleportation scrolls come into use, but they're kind of rare at the start of the game. Obviously later it's probably going to be very much a normal thing to just die, spawn to your use the teleport scroll to teleport to your friend or whatever, or get to your corpse. Funny enough, I did end up changing one of my controls. The map was very important in navigating, so I ended up just changing it to tab, since tab was like the show the scoreboard or whatever, so like you could see how many people were in your world or whatever. But it was just so annoying. I had to change to tab to make it so it was much more easier to navigate with the map, since you do have a mini map, but it's not very great for navigating, I would say, since it's harder to see. Now there is magic in the game, and you do start with 100 mana. Mana slowly regenerates, your health slowly regenerates, assuming that you have the correct amount of hunger, is my understanding. If you are past a certain amount of hunger or you don't have enough, I don't think your health regenerates. As for your mana, I believe it always regenerates at a fixed rate. There are items and things that can increase the mana regeneration rate. So there are like spell books very much like Terraria. There aren't too many, and they aren't super great, honestly, at the start of the game. They are like kind of interesting. In the later stage of the game, they do kind of get more in depth, and there's a few more from the 13 hours that I've played so far. There were cool extra effects and extra kind of things that Terraria didn't have. So things like armor perks had actual, not only set bonuses or whatever, but they also had like usable abilities from them. Usually a lot of the time you had to have the set to get those abilities, but it would be something like, oh, let me sacrifice some of my health to get a damage bonus and a speed bonus, or let me press this, you know, my abilities armor and throw a bunch of my own coins to deal damage. It was very cool and very much a creative thing that Terraria really hasn't done. They kind of had like a little bit of that with the summoner stuff, and yes, there are summons in this game. Honestly, they're kind of OP. It was kind of a little annoying. And when it came to other things, like you could make your own little like pen of cows or other animals. So there's like farm animals that you can use to get milk and meat and leather and such. I didn't explore it too much. It's called husbandry, and I'll kind of talk about this a little bit later, but when we get to the settlement part of the game, which is a big part of the game, you can have villagers or people in your settlement, either merchants or whatever. People like the angler, for example, much like in Terraria, you can interact with them and they kind of have stuff that you can do. But I you know, like gathering all these sheep, and you can have them sheared, but you have to feed them to have them be tamed. I'm not super familiar with all of this stuff so far because I didn't really explore too much. I kind of just like grab some rope, rope them into a pen, and kind of just, you know, let the rest take care of the rest. But I would shear them for wool, which is used for quite a few things, and then you use the cow for milk later, which you do have to actually learn. I learned that you have to feed your settlement, your settlers of your settlement, and that's gonna take a lot of resources and a lot of planning of organization. But really another cool thing about this game is that trinkets upgrade into other trinkets, just like in Terraria. And in this one, it was very fun to kind of look forward to getting a trinket. You can have a total of 4 trinkets. Later in the game, you do unlock the ability to have more than just 4, but having increased attack speed or having a light on you 24/7 with a trinket really allows to kind of customize your stats in what you kind of want to specialize in. There are obviously nicer ones and better trinkets than other ones. A lot of the time you don't really have much of a choice until later, until you get more of them. Some of them are pretty bland on occasion, some of them are really valuable, and it's awesome because you can keep them and upgrade them into other trinkets, other passive bonuses. So there's something called the settlement flag, and I didn't bother playing with it at all for a good portion of the game, so I wanted to learn the basics and the core idea of all the mechanics, but I learned pretty quickly that it's going to be a large part of the game, as you can even have people who not only work for you and manage your settlement, you can also have them come and fight with you in a party, and you can control how they behave. You can give them potions. You can make it so whenever they enter combat, they drink combat potions and battle potions so they're stronger. You can customize their gear. You give them armor and weapons and such, make them stronger and have more health and all these other things. It's definitely a large part of the game, and I am still actually learning quite a bit about it. I will touch on it a little bit more, but first, how do you find them? Now, they are found in random areas of the map, and the first thing you have to do before you do any of that is name your settlement. And oh boy, did I take like probably about 5 minutes trying to figure out what I wanted to call it. I ended up calling it whatever my friend had on his desk and whatever I had on my desk. And of course, I had some gummy Jolly Ranchers on my desk, but we finally settled on combining harmonica and Jolly Ranchers to get a settlement called Arjol. So he had a harmonica. I took the first 3 letters of that, Har, and then I had some Jolly Ranchers. I put Joel, and then Harjol was born. Now you can change the name, and oh boy, was there a lot of things to learn in this part of the game. You can assign them to beds, you can banish them, you can change their name, you can move them to a different settlement, you can give them orders, you can clear orders, you can select all your guys, you can move them around. There was a lot of things I had to learn. I was playing StarCraft or something, moving them around and telling them to guard certain locations. It was very interesting and funny at the same time. But as you can see, like, there's the equipment, there's their diet, and then you can like restrict which areas they're in. You can tell them to work in a certain space. You can tell them later on, these are going to be filled out. This guy can't do any actual harvesting or work. He just sits around and kind of does nothing, honestly, quite frankly. He does sell you stuff, I believe, if I remember correctly, but later you learn that like only certain people can do farming or fertilizing or husbandry. I still haven't found somebody who can do husbandry, which is just like harvesting, milking, and various farm life, and like harvesting honey from apiaries, from bees. Others like hunting and fishing and all this other stuff, and each settler has their own actual thing about them that they can do, and you have to assign certain areas for certain types of workers. So you can like assign a forestry zone. So you give them a chest, you put some seeds in it, they grab those seeds, they plant and chop down everything in that area where that forestry zone is. They deposit all the wood, all that kind of stuff. It's just like, it took a little bit of figuring out and trial and error of like, how does it work? What are they going to do when they don't have this? And sometimes there was also a pawnbroker that would come, and this is, as far as I know so far, the only way to sell anything. So pawnbrokers will buy anything. They do have a limit of how much money they have to give away or to be able to trade with. But then I don't think you could ever have the pawnbroker. He would occasionally show up at your settlement once you are settled. But each settler kind of had their own kind of purpose, their own kind of benefit to having them. So obviously you do want kind of one of everybody. There's for like alchemy, they sell potions, and you can sell them specific things related to alchemy. You could sell so for example, the hunter, you could sell stuff related to hunting. So like leather and other various things like that. When you did finally have your settlement all done and made, you could find these settlers in specific locations. So you could find them in biomes, and they wanted certain things before they joined your settlement. And a lot of the time it can be kind of tricky. You didn't have all the resources, you need more copper ore or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you could find them in dungeons or, you know, somewhere in the underground, or just sometimes they will come to your base. Usually it wasn't ever too big of an issue. And once they join your settlement, they could sometimes even do tasks for you, which is very interesting. So you can buy stuff from them. They have like their own kind of things that they sell, usually related to whatever they are. The angler sells like, you know, bait, and they all kind of sell like a cosmetic outfit. And when it came to the miner, for example, you could send them on like quests, fishing trips or mining trips to go get a certain type of ore. And that was really awesome and really crazy, and it helped a lot, but you had to pay them with coins. So you had to not only pay them to go get stuff, you needed to make money and you needed to feed them as well. So you needed to have a lot of like systems helping and supporting them to do these things. You needed them to have food, you needed them to have a bed, you needed them to have a room, and of course you needed money. So how did you get money? Well, usually you did stuff like you can sell some wool or something, or a lot of the time you got the majority of your money from fighting enemies, and a lot of the time I ended up running out of money. So I actually ended up having to ask my friend to purchase those trips to get that resource, whatever resource I was asking them to go get. But money was very much an issue, at least for me, since I was usually the one like telling my settlers to go and do various tasks or buying certain things from them. Like if whenever you fight a boss or defeat a boss, sometimes you're all of your settlers, depending on which ones you have, they can sometimes provide different things that you can buy whenever you beat a boss. So much like Terraria, whenever you found a gun, and for example in Terraria, you could unlock the guy who sold the like weapons, like guns, and you could buy like a shotgun, and whenever you fought certain enemies, it would unlock various other weapons based on whatever tier boss you fought. So a lot of this stuff, especially like buying settlers all the time, because they usually want money to join your settlement, and sometimes whatever resource they're associated with, it kind of got expensive. Probably if you're playing by yourself, it's not going to be as big of a deal, but with me and my friend kind of doing separate tasks all the time, I was kind of the stay-at-home, you know, trying to make the settlement work, while he kind of sometimes went out without me. He brought home the bread, so it was helpful for purchasing and getting more resources and such for the development of the settlement. So, and when it comes to making your settlers happy, they won't work if they're hungry or if they're upset in some way. There is an unhappiness meter. Whenever you aren't properly taking care of them, they won't do work and they will just sit around. They won't do anything. They will refuse to work. So getting all of that structure up to make it so that they were working all the time did take some effort and planning and a lot of organization. But when they want something, they'll usually tell you what they need, and you can kind of like figure this stuff out. It's not like it's like impossible to figure out. Understanding the amount of stuff that they need is definitely a trial and error, and what they require specifically is definitely going to take some time to learn, but it's very straightforward and like when they tell you what they need kind of thing. The biggest issue I had, honestly, managing all of the settlement is they would essentially, because they have hauling on, they would grab stuff and just put it in random chests. So if they were working on like forestry or farming or something, they would just start putting stuff in chests that I have already organized, and it was quite annoying. So you have to kind of restrict them to work areas with assigned work. So you have to be like, okay, this chest is available, and then you go into that chest and you enable, okay, you can put seeds in here. Like seeds can go in here, a specific seed, like let's say like wheat seeds or something. This is the wheat chest, and you can put wheat seeds and wheat in here. And it was quite a bit to figure out. I might make a video on this, kind of explaining how to do this and go how to like optimize this a little bit better, or at least understand it so you can actually figure it out, because it did take some practice and learning. It definitely took a little bit of time and a little bit of brain power to try to see, you know, what does it mean by hauling? What is it actually referring to? Like how do I make this person haul something to here, right? It's very much a thing of like trial and error, especially if you don't have experience like managing things. Like I've played like StarCraft and stuff, right, and a couple other games where you got to control your army or people and command them and micromanage them and stuff. But a lot of the time I find myself just sitting in base while my friend went out and ventured without me, trying to figure out all of these things and how it worked, because it was a quite long process to understand like what things meant. There was one thing that did help me keep track of things, was the adventure journal. It's kind of like an achievement system. So the adventure guide really did help kind of show you what you were missing in each kind of biome and in which caverns, so like the caverns or the caves. It did help you kind of keep track of what you were doing, or maybe what you missed or what you need to do. It did kind of help guide you to where you should be going or what you should be doing. A lot of the time it did cover the majority of like the stuff in the biome, kind of helping you where to go at what time kind of thing. Be like, oh, like there's a biome here and there's a bunch of stuff I haven't discovered, so I'm going to go there kind of thing, right? So it did help you kind of guide you to where you should be going, or guide you if you missed something. So I did find that very helpful. And whenever you completed all the tasks in that area, which you were kind of encouraged to do so, because at the end, whenever you did do those things, you would get some type of reward, which was a really cool way to try to make you play through all of the content, experience all the content, which I really enjoyed. And there were puzzle dungeons where it was just a simple kind of area that you really couldn't interact with in any way. You couldn't destroy any of the tiles or blocks. But at the end of the puzzles that you had to figure out, and they were pretty simple in terms of how it was, we kind of struggled with it just because of like, it was difficult to try to align ourselves properly, and we kind of like lost track of where we were a little bit. But I kind of got the hang of it, and I did end up getting to the end and us figuring out how to do it. But it was very interesting, and it was a very cool little thing. But it does take some practice and of figuring it out. For some people, it might be kind of difficult because you do need to have a good sense of like positioning, and it looks a lot harder than it actually seems, which is kind of funny. I didn't expect myself to be struggling with something so simple seeming, but like just trying to align yourself of where you were on the buttons. If you didn't hit the buttons, for example, for this one, you have to take that white path that's displayed, but when you are off the button, the issue that arose, it starts to disappear. So that means you have to kind of go quickly to try to avoid not getting lost. Now, it wasn't difficult in the way that the path wasn't difficult to like figure out what they wanted you to do. What was difficult about it was knowing kind of where you were based on its helpful kind of thing, because obviously it's off to the side, so you need to look at it and be like, okay, I have like 4 squares here, 5 squares here, and I can go to, you know, the edge or whatever. But if you step on one button because you think you're in a position that you're not, the door will close and you need to get through the area without touching any of the other buttons. So a lot of these we only found one, I believe, but this one was quite tedious. And we struggled quite a bit, and it was super annoying because there was that time frame of like, oh hey, you have to do this perfectly, otherwise the door doesn't open. So we're like, okay, we get to the end of the door and the door is closed, and we're like, what the hell? We have to obviously, you know, get through it without getting hit. So it was quite annoying, and as I said, it looks a little bit more difficult, or maybe we're just super awful at the game, quite frankly, because if we were like with that, in terms of that puzzle, it was just awful, and trying to align our character correctly on all of the buttons. But so the final thing I kind of wanted to talk about was the combat, the weapons, because that's kind of the biggest part of the game. I'll be honest, magic felt pretty crappy at the start of the game. It felt very weak. And my friend, once you get like a summoning spell or like an item, it kind of is insane how much DPS they have. Like I was kind of rocking in the early stages, like, oh, you get like, you know, at the very start of the game, you have like very low DPS, maybe 50 DPS tops from anything, right? And then in the later stage of the game, you're kind of like, oh, I'm kind of aiming for like 100 DPS or like, you know, whatever. And my friend, just with his summons alone, and this was in the early stages of the game without any more trinkets to help him buff with his little helpers, summoning helpers, it did just so much damage, and it was basically just free damage all the time. It was kind of insane, because like when I was playing and I was using, you know, whatever spell I kind of had, like they were decent and they had AoE, like it could hit multiple targets, but like some of the stabs just felt very weak and underwhelming in terms of their actual DPS, where my friend has had summons and didn't have to do anything except command them where to go, and they obviously auto attack enemies and stuff, and to my knowledge they don't die, so they're kind of like these unstoppable dots going everywhere on any target near you. And like I have to like using my staff, and I'm trying to like aim at targets, hit the target. I already have low DPS, so I'm not going to be hitting the target all the time, and it's like it felt kind of awful using magic. Now what you just saw right there was that little circle of healing, and this is where magic started to get slightly more interesting, and there's more examples of this, I assume, in the future. But when playing, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like this staff that I have, when on a chance on hit, it allows me to get a charge of something, and then I can expend that charge to do a heal, like an AoE heal, so I can heal myself and my friend. And when it came to a lot of the other like weapons of magic, the earlier stages weren't too great. I did end up using this kind of like freezing wand, which did have decent DPS, and it hit multiple targets. and it was easy and simple. It didn't like break, you know, I could very easily aim it, miss or whatever, and readjust my aim. It wasn't like a projectile I needed to hit on the target. And don't get me wrong, like using magic wasn't like bad or anything. It's just that my friend just had a passive 180 DPS on a single target at all times, so it seems kind of silly to not do summoning every single time for optimization purposes. Not only does it protect you when you're doing anything, it's just a flat amount of DPS added to you. Plus you can attack. So it's not only you can use summons, but you can also use magic and a melee weapon, for example, for whatever situation you're in. So a summoner is probably going to be the most kind of crazy DPS at the start, I assume. I'm not sure how it's going to scale in the later stages of the game, but so far in the early game, summons are really broken, quite frankly. Compared to magic, and melee it's a good solid thing, but you do put yourself at risk because you're getting close to enemies. And once you start developing further into the game, you fight enemies that have ranged attacks or power attacks that charge up and do a lot of damage, so you want to avoid them. And ranged attacks are kind of always king in a lot of things because they're very safe. You can deal damage from a distance. So when I was attacked, I had the benefit of being able to heal myself. So this obviously allowed for a little bit of utility with magic. And don't get me wrong, everything kind of probably has its place. In the later game, I'm sure that the balance will kind of even out, probably, I imagine. But in the early game, it felt very, very weak, unless you're going for like some level of utility. What I mean by magic felt weak, I mean like, oh hey, like I can kill these enemies much better than my friend can, because each little summon can only attack one target at a time, by knowledge. And I could hit multiple targets, but as I said, just get a summon staff, get summon armor, get a little bit of magic support or whatever you want to do, and then just use a magic weapon, right? Basically allowing you to give you so much flexibility in your DPS and utility for killing multiple targets, for example, since summons struggle with a large group of enemies. But obviously in the early part of the game, magic is very limited. I also was able to get a ranged weapon, which is a gun. It's like a little machine gun, and it was really strong. It only hit one target, so it didn't pierce, but in the later stages, I just ended up trying to use magic primarily. But you do have to consider you have a limited amount of mana. So if you have a limited amount of mana, you can't be attacking large groups of enemies. So if you had like summons, and then you had various types of things to support you, like a gun, since you just need to worry about the ammo resource instead of the mana resource, which does cost coins and money or whatever. But a lot of the time it was tricky to kind of not feel a little bit jealous of my friend who had these summons that were just so powerful, and he could play really safely and not have an issue, where I was using magic and I was trying to use like some swords or whatever too, and it just didn't really end up being as fun for me in that circumstance, just simply because like I felt like I wasn't strong in that moment. And it was still early parts of the game, technically speaking, but I enjoy when I feel like I'm actually helping. I enjoy, you know, kind of using optimized gear, not because it's what I want to do per se, but it's because I want to have some flexibility of like, oh, like, you know, I want to use magic, but I want it to be good, of course, right? Which makes sense. And it sucks that my friend who, you know, is just using summoning gear, he's kind of has to walk around near a target or tell him to stick his summons on something, and then he's fine. So when it came to a lot of like the combat, I was kind of bummed out at the early stages once he kind of committed to doing summoning items and spells and stuff, our summoning build, where I was kind of like, oh, I kind of want to do melee and I kind of want to do magic or whatever. And I tried out kind of a little bit of everything, and magic offered some utility, of course, and range was probably just the best, like straight up DPS a lot of the time. It's just a safe thing to do until you get to certain stages. And melee weapons, I didn't like it using any other melee weapon other than the greatsword. It had better reach, it had charging up, so I could engage the target however I wanted, and a lot of the time I just one-shot them because of the large charging up of the charges for damage. I could just charge it up, attack them, and it was really easy and simple. And you had to spend very little time around them, essentially, because they also had charge up attacks too, and they would kind of lunge and charge at you once they charged up, which did do a lot of damage. And there's like rooting, so it's like melee kind of sucks in that circumstance, right? So you kind of want to retreat back to range, and it comes back to like just using that summon again, where it's like, okay, the summons are just king because they don't die, they attack all those things, and you can just run away. Like you can, you know, it's maybe not a fun way to play per se, but it is a effective way to play. But now, as I've been continuing to play, I did get a few more spells and upgraded. Once you kind of get to like the runestone spells, that's when spells start to feel stronger. Things start to feel a little bit more balanced. The melee weapons are probably still a little bit falling behind, but they are still very viable. But as I said, magic is definitely something that you'd want to not focus on at the start. Get a couple items and you'll kind of just see, like I tried to use every single type of magic item I could find. I'm like, this one's kind of weak, this one's too like niche, like I gotta hit the target and blah blah blah. And like this staff can heal people, but like I don't need to heal people if I don't need to heal myself or people if I kill the target in 1 second or whatever, right? So I was trying to kind of do a lot of things at once and try to see what was best. And a lot of the time it was just not discovering anything interesting for magic. And as for range is pretty reliable. It's not super crazy good or super crazy bad. It was just consistent, decent. Melee was interesting. Like there was like the spear, and only the spear tip of the when you poked with their spear did damage. So if they were too close to you, you had to back up. So you kind of had to be kind of strategic with that. It didn't do any crazy amount of DPS more than anything else, but it was kind of interesting. So you had a little bit more range with a melee kind of weapon, but a lot of the time it was just outshunned by using the greatsword, because you charge it up, you swing it, things die, right? Very simple. It hits multiple targets, and it was really great for killing large groups of enemies, large groups of enemies in one strike. It was really awesome. You pile them up around a corner, you take them out, and they just die one shot. It was really cool and really fun. That's the only thing that really made me feel useful with my friend, where he was kind of had a lot of DPS, but I could have a lot of burst, or quick burst AoE with my two-handed greatsword or whatever it was. So I definitely enjoyed that kind of aspect of it, where certain things had different capabilities and things like that. When it came to the later stages of the game, ranged weapons kind of seemed to fall off just a little bit in terms of like they're very simple and don't have much to provide other than you shoot a projectile and you hit the target. The great bow was more fun to use since you had to charge it up. And then when it came to other types of magic that you got later on, it was much stronger. But of course you did get this at the later stage in the game. So like I was able to do some more DPS now that I have a couple of bosses under my belt, and I had like some gear to increase the damage of my magic. So magic started to feel much better. And there were melee weapons that were very cool and unique that also had insane amounts of DPS. So like if I ran out of magic, I could swap to melee and kind of make that transition to attacking. So it did feel like there was something for everybody in terms of like viability. Some felt less viable than others, but generally speaking, once you started to get more into the game, a lot of the crappy weapons that you had originally started to become much more interesting. There were better spells, there were better melee weapons, and the summons were kind of varied in like their creativity and how they attacked and such. As you can see, my friend has these weird tree things that smash with hammers, and I think the longer they attack, the stronger they get or something, or the faster they attack. So, and for certain magic things, you had things where I had to build up a certain amount of charges and I could heal people. So it was very cool. And my armor set allowed me to create 3 charges of healing so that I could kind of just have that staff as just strictly a healing staff without actually having to use it to build up those charges to heal people. So it had a lot of variety and some really cool mechanics I've never really seen before in this type of perspective of a game. It was very similar to Terraria, but then even Terraria didn't have a lot of these kind of cool concepts that I have shown so far. And then because I had killed some of the bosses, you were even able to buy a shotgun, and this one was pretty decent as well. It's a projectile, it has a good amount of DPS in close range, and it's pretty flexible in terms of like how you're eliminating enemies. I'll be honest, it basically felt exactly the same as the shotgun in Terraria. Kind of hilarious. Yeah, there's even some familiar types of magic where you can control the projectile, much like Magic Missile in Terraria. And then there's also this thing where it's like a shadow staff from Terraria as well, where it kind of pierces targets, and I believe it bounces off walls to do more damage or whatever. So it was very familiar, and I definitely enjoy this game a lot. I'll be honest, probably even a little bit more than Terraria. I've only played a little bit of this game so far, but I really have been enjoying it. It has been a very fun, enjoyable experience. This is 1.0, so this was technically the release of the game, the official release at least. And there's so much more stuff to make and build and expand on that I'm super excited to kind of see where this game goes once I finish playing more. If you don't want to see spoilers for the first boss, then click away right now. But I will say just before you click away, this game has been an incredible experience so far. I really enjoyed myself. It's like playing Terraria again for the first time. Honestly, I recommend this game if you like Terraria or Starbound or any game like that. Definitely buy this game. Play it with friends. It's going to make the experience much better, in my opinion. And here's me fighting a bunch of bosses with my friend. This is the first boss that we fight. So definitely try out this game. It's 1.0 release, and it's definitely worth getting. It's super enjoyable. So many aspects and avenues into this game. You can really get a lot of enjoyment out of it. There's so many things to do. I don't know how long the game is. It's been 13 hours. I'm pretty thorough when I play my games. So I try to experience everything, so I do take a little bit longer to beat games or finish games, but overall this experience was super fun. I'm definitely going to keep playing, and I'll probably release some Let's Play if you guys want to like see how me and my friend played and follow me along in my journey of playing the game for the first time As I said, this is my first time playing, so I've been enjoying the hell of it. So I do recommend you get this game if you have an interest in these types of games. But anyway, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching and have a good day.